100% propeller, 100% domestic, 100% New Zealand. Follow me on this journey across the length of this amazingly beautiful country from north to south. This is Air New Zealand.
Step 1, wake up early, gonna rise with the sun. Step 2, get some good, some food in you. Step 3, think real hard about what you wanna be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 Wake up.
And g'day everyone, welcome back to my video, and I'm coming to you from Hamilton, Kirikiriroa here in New Zealand, and I am getting on one of the domestic flights on Air New Zealand from here in Hamilton to Wellington, and then to the southernmost airport here you can ever get to in the country, which is Invercargill. So let's head into the terminal and get this experience started. Let's do this.
Everybody just do your thing.
Kia ora and welcome to my channel. If you're tuning in for the first time, my name's Ryan. Born and bred in Singapore, I now live in Australia, and I create heaps of travel and food-related content. This episode in New Zealand is just one small part of a wider travel series which began in my home airport of Adelaide a week and a half ago. I flew to Melbourne, and I spent a few days there filming an entire foodie video. Bonza Airlines beckoned, and that brought me to Sunshine Coast. I ended up in Gympie, where I took the train to Brisbane. The world's most beautiful business class cabin brought me into Auckland yesterday. This morning, I find myself in the country's newest train service, which brought me to Hamilton. Tomorrow, my journey back to Auckland begins from Invercargill, one of the world's southernmost airport. The drama of a flight cancellation and excruciating ground experience at Auckland Airport has already been covered in 2 comprehensive videos before. I then finally get on one last flight on Qantas to take me home. If you like such content, make sure you tune in for what's coming up next. Even better, hit subscribe and the bell icon so you'll get notified whenever the next episode goes to air. Giving me a like will ensure YouTube knows I'm doing the right thing. So here's a thanks, because your support is very much appreciated. Hamilton is New Zealand's 10th busiest airport. There have been several attempts over the years to get international services in and out of here, but passenger numbers were just not feasible. The last attempt was by Virgin Australia to and from Brisbane, and those flights ended in October 2012. For now, Hamilton is chugging along as a fully domestic airport with an annual average of just over 350,000 passengers, mostly heading to Wellington and Christchurch. For such a small airport, it's no surprise Air New Zealand is the dominant airline here. With roughly about 14 flights daily, one corner of this beautiful terminal has been dedicated to Air New Zealand alone. The other airline serving Hamilton is Origin Air, linking Hamilton with Nelson and Palmerston North. You can reach Hamilton Airport from town either by a private car, Uber, or public taxis. But whatever you do, avoid the taxis. During my stay in New Zealand, I was totally relying on public Wi-Fi, so I did not have a local SIM card. Therefore, I could not order myself an Uber when I got off the train earlier on at Frankton. This 20-minute ride from the train station cost me an eye-watering 65 New Zealand dollars. That was almost all of my budgeted lunch and dinner money today. And this over-budget predicament would bite me further at Wellington Airport later on. I was contemplating whether or not to check in my bags. But I remember traveling with similar amount of bags which would not fit into a Dash 8. I then realized I would see that aircraft type on my second sector between Wellington and Invercargill. As I was umming and ahhing, a staff member came over and said, "Nah, you gotta check it all in." So bye-bye bags. I'll see you in about 8.5 hours a lot further down south. Yes, it would take me this long to track down there today, And soon enough in this video, you'll understand why. Self-help is the way to go. Yeah, that was a pretty straightforward process, and that's it, I'm done. I've got a couple of hours. What time is it now? It is 1, so my flight is at 2:15. Got a couple of hours to hang out here. And this very, very tiny airport, yeah. On this day of travel, the airport in Queenstown had a bomb scare leading to a total evacuation of the terminal building for a couple of hours. The ramifications of this saw flights get cancelled because no one could get in or out. The cascaded effects of this morning's events would throw Air New Zealand's scheduling into disarray as the day went along, because flight crews weren't able to get to where they were supposed to be going. And it started with our flight, arriving 30 minutes late from Christchurch. Short and sweet, this is the best way to describe domestic flights within New Zealand, because the country is only that big. The longest non-stop domestic flight comes in at about an hour 40 minutes between Invercargill and Auckland. So flights are 100% economy with Air New Zealand. Within this economy class, your fare is segregated into 4 tiers. The lowest is seat, self-explanatory. You're just paying to place your bum there. Next up is seat plus bag, which is what I paid for today, and I have a 23 kilogram check-in allowance. Finally, there's the works, which is everything I mentioned, plus on appropriate aircraft and sector, you get access to seat back entertainment, complimentary hot food and drinks, and seat selection. That tier covers international flights. There is one further tier called Works Deluxe to include priority check-in, boarding, and baggage pickup, but from what I understand, Work Deluxe is presently in the process of getting deleted. Taking us to Wellington on this beautiful day is Zulu Kilo Mike Victor Papa, an ATR 72-600, which was delivered to Mount Cook Airlines in July 2017. It now flies in the striking colours of Air New Zealand, making this aircraft just under 6.5 years old at the time of writing. I've always been looking forward to Air New Zealand because I've heard how friendly the flight attendants are. And the welcome on board was a great start. This ATR 72 has a capacity for 68 passengers over a 2x2 configuration. The black and grey interior looked like it was kept in a decent condition. Seat pitch is said to be 31 inches, and the recline lever is located right here. Recline is alright actually. The overhead console consists of air nozzles and a reading lamp which didn't work.
The lever. All loose items should now be stowed in overhead lockers or underneath the seat in front of you. Smoking and vaping are not allowed anywhere on this aircraft. Charging e-cigarettes and vapes is also prohibited. If an emergency occurs during takeoff or landing, adopt one of the recommended brace positions found on your safety card. Life jackets are located under your seat. The safety card shows how to fit and use your life jacket. Infant life jackets will be provided by the crew. There are 4 emergency exits on this aircraft. The safety card shows where the emergency exits are located and how to open them.
This flight was going to be a quick one. Flight path was mostly southerly as we trekked towards our destination, passing by some rather stunning volcano peaks. The journey into Wellington Airport continued as we swung about for a landing from the south, battling the infamous winds, completing the journey in 65 minutes, clocking a distance of just under 390 kilometers. On domestic flights within New Zealand, no matter what economy class fare you've paid, water, tea, coffee, and a snack is served free of charge. So first things first, everyone gets given a cup of water. Next run is the snack, followed by a cup with milk and sugar if you've opted for a hot bevy. And finally, you get your hot bevy of choice. In my case, I went with a cup of tea. I was anticipating these domestic flights in New Zealand because I knew a stunning view out of my window awaited. Unfortunately, this would be the last time I saw anything worth noting because the delay later on at Wellington Airport meant that my daytime flight towards the South Island, bound for Invercargill, would happen mostly in the dark. And the following flights tomorrow, both of them happened in some very severe spring storms on both islands. Oh well. So for now, let's just appreciate this flight over Tongariro National Park. Within sight here, you'll see the volcanoes of Ruapehu, Ngauruhoe, and Tongariro. Mount Tongariro last erupted in November 2012, after being dormant since 1899. We're now in the final stages of approach into Wellington International Airport. They don't call it Windy Welly for nothing. Approaches into this airport is incredibly challenging because of the winds battering an approaching aircraft. This is because Wellington sits on the edge of Cook Strait, a major gap between two mountain ranges running the length of North and South Islands. This gap acts like a funnel and makes the winds much stronger on the Wellington side as they head southwards towards the sea. You can't tell from this footage because the image stabilization is very strong on my GoPro. But the water waves should give you an indication of the amount of times this roller coaster approach made some people scream in the cabin. And some of these people screaming were men. Maybe a man, which might or might not have been me. I went commando for the second leg of this journey because my undies promptly went into the bin after I disembarked. Flight number 1 is done. So I'm here for a few hours and then we are off to Invercargill. Yeah, that was a nice flight. So let's see what Wellington Airport is like, yeah? My jaws dropped and I stained my undies even further at this point. Because by golly, what a beautiful airport this is. If you were traumatized by the landing earlier on, this would surely go a long way to soothe your anxiety. It felt like I was stepping into a museum of anthropology, with all that earthy colors, different shades of green and brown. Wellington, being the capital of New Zealand, has definitely put on an impressive show of a very positive first impression if you've never been here before. By now, flight delays and cancellations were coming fast and furious because of the Queenstown bomb scare. I scheduled a transit of 2.5 hours, and seeing how my onward flight was now delayed, that meant dinner plans in Invercargill were now thrown into the bin, just like my undies. I reluctantly settled down for a $25 dinner of a ham and cheese croissant, plus a bottle of fizzy. That hardly filled me at all. So I headed for the sushi joint, and that cost me another $20. Shit. I was honestly afraid of getting hungry again after that. One thing which struck me during my stay is how expensive New Zealand is in general. Another observation I made while flying was the tremendous amount of unaccompanied minors with every flight. I did a total of 4 sectors and they were there for all of them. These children with bright tags easily took up a few rows by themselves. So with today's delays and cancellations, you can imagine the parents waiting to receive them at the destination. I would not want to be in their shoes. So here I am, walking past passengers of a cancelled flight to somewhere, and out of camera view were a couple of these unaccompanied minors on the phones to their parents that their flights had been cancelled. And they yelled into the phone some more that the flight is really cancelled. Poor things. The delay for this flight NZ8877 was because the original crew rostered to take us tonight was stuck at another airport. So the airline desperately scoured for another set of available crew to take us to Invercargill. Better late than never. I'd rather be late than face a cancellation because of my onward plans for tomorrow. I took this flight on the 6th of October, and the sun sets a little later in this part of the world. So I would have almost flown past most of South Island at this point if the flight was on time. And I would have been able to show you the amazing snow-capped Southern Alps of New Zealand's South Island. Unfortunately, this wasn't going to happen at all. Taking us on this very delayed flight was a de Havilland Canada -A300, which was first delivered to Air Nelson in November 2005. It has since been absorbed into Air New Zealand, where it continues to fly till this day. I've now come to expect a warm and perky welcome with every Air New Zealand flight, and this one was no exception. The flight attendant was extremely overly perky, but we later learned that she and the rest of the crew were informed last minute to run to these aircraft to take us down south. And she was obviously still breathless, and I don't blame her, because today would have been such a mess for everyone working. Having flown these -8s with QantasLink several times, they've become some of my favorite aircraft types. This one with Air New Zealand has a capacity for 50 passengers in an all-economy layout, configured in a 2x2. While it looks cramped on the first impression, on settling down, the seat pitch is actually rather favorable, and I'll show you that in a minute. There you go. When was the last time we saw this kind of pitch in economy class? That's 32 inches worth of it. You have a seat pocket with a safety card and magazine, and a single fold-down tray table. Reading lamps above and individual air nozzles complete the features. And no, these seats do not recline. By the time we got settled, we got going some 1 hour 15 minutes behind schedule. While I could have moaned about not having my Southern Alps view and arriving into Inver in the dark, there were a lot more travellers today who are now stranded at airports all around New Zealand due to cancelled flights. So let's look at the glass half full and be thankful we are continuing our journey, just a little later. Urbanization around the fringes of Wellington International Airport is pretty incredible. There is simply no more space for any sort of expansion. Our takeoff from runway 34 was swift. A right turn would take us in the opposite direction, and we maintained a mostly southwesterly flight path towards Christchurch. We would finally touch down after a straight-in approach into Invercargill Airport, the southernmost airport in the Commonwealth, after a flight time of 1 hour 55 minutes, covering a distance of just over 770 kilometers. As we settled on our cruising altitude, it was also a great time to savor the last hours of daylight. Cabin service also began right about here. It was very leisurely because the flight attendant took her time to cater to our needs. This flight was almost 2 hours long, so no one was in a rush to get anywhere. We've all been affected by today's event one way or another and had stories to share. So what's a few more hours of this fantastic flight? Don't think anyone was complaining. I mentioned about some rather severe storms tomorrow earlier in the video. The beginnings of it was forecast to happen tonight, so the buffering winds made this flight rather bumpy, leading to the seatbelt signs remaining mostly on. Similar to the earlier flight, I chose to have a cup of tea, but this time I grabbed a handful of snacks. I was absolutely famished and my tummy growls were growing by the minute. At the back of my mind, a little panic started to set in, because I was wondering what the hell was I going to have for dinner after arrival, with everything in town shut. One enduring thing about flying Air New Zealand is they hand out lollies towards the end of the flight. These lollies were handed out by an unaccompanied minor tonight, which was supervised by the flight attendant. It brought smiles to everyone as we instinctively went, "Aww." And these lollies are useful to alleviate any pain in your ears as the aircraft descends for arrival. Speaking of which, it's time for me to draw my thoughts on my first ever experience flying domestic within New Zealand. Today was one of those days as an airline where everything which could go wrong went wrong. It all started with the Queenstown incident, which snowballed into everything else. This just comes to show how intertwined daily flight operations is, where 25 cancelled flights in Queenstown would cause so much chaos throughout the day. My concern turned to horror as I sat in Wellington Airport watching rolling delays turn into cancelled flights. Suppose my flight was one of those lucky ones, as a rolling delay just stopped there. So imagine my relief when NZ8877 was called for boarding. On both flights, these hosties were fantastic in the way they carried themselves. They were all proud to work for this airline and it showed. Little touches for the second flight, like getting the unaccompanied minor to distribute lollies, was genius. It put a smile on so many tired faces around me, and that was definitely a great end to what was an extremely exhausting day of travel for so many of us. Speaking of which, I just can't wait to land and go to bed. So let's arrive into Invercargill Airport, shall we?
Back a year ago.
Now, that was my absolutely long day of travel today in New Zealand. I started my journey this morning in Auckland at 7 a.m. where I left the Novotel Auckland Airport, and then I took a taxi to the Strand station where I took the Huia train to Hamilton, flew to Wellington where our flight got so delayed. It is now 9:50 p.m. So I've been on the road, it's almost 10 p.m. now. So I've been on the road for how long now? 15 hours I've been on the road today. Yep, so now I am finally in Invercargill. This is the southernmost airport. I flew into the southernmost airport in New Zealand and I am absolutely hungry because I don't think I had a proper dinner yet. So for the first time in a long time, I've ordered room service and I gotta wait for that to come, have something to eat, and then I'm going to sleep because tomorrow I have an early start because I'm flying back to Auckland. So that is another adventure. Hopefully it won't be as long as today. So anyway, I have chucked details of my Instagram on your screen right now. So hit me up there, chuck me a follow so you can see what am I up to in real time. And of course, more importantly, do not forget to hit the subscribe and the bell notification icon so you know every single time I get on such a long commute again. Okay, so in the meantime, take care all of you and I will see you for my next video. Bye.